NDOW comment on the draft environmental impact statement for the SNWA Water Authority Groundwater Development and Conveyance Project. Chairman McBeath for possible action. The department will give the commission an update on the Southern Nevada Water Authority Groundwater Development and Conveyance Project and the potential impact to wildlife water resources in the vicinity of the project. The department shall also give the commission an update on its status in the Southern Nevada Water Authority's pending hearings before the Nevada State Engineer and Nevada Division of Water Resources, including the department's status as a protestant to the Southern Nevada Water Authority's pending applications in Spring Valley, Cave Valley, Dry Lake Valley, and Delamar Valley. The Commission may provide policy direction to the Nevada Department of Wildlife on all such matters and may take action to direct NDOW to provide written comments to the BLM DEIS. The Commission may also provide policy direction to NDOW on NDOW's protests to this. Okay, I'm here. I'm back. The Commission may also provide policy direction to NDOW on NDOW's protest to the Southern Nevada Water Authority's pending applications, including any settlements to withdraw such protests. The Commission may also decide to write a letter of its own in support of the comments of the Nevada Department of Wildlife. Now, I need to make a disclosure. And indicate, even though this is my agenda item, that I have a potential conflict of interest, and that I'll probably be abstaining from any vote. From the period of March 1st, 2005, my brother purchased a ranch in Cave Valley, and starting in approximately in 2006, we embarked on, well, first filing applications for water, and second protesting the applications of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and subsequent litigation, 2.5 years of litigation, which culminated in a settlement which included both monetary compensation as well as additional water rights to be conveyed to the ranch. And because of that, I feel there's a pecuniary interest through my relationship with my brother. Now, I have resigned from all aspects of the ranch, no longer involved in any of the ranching or any legal issues or anything whatsoever, other than going there and having fun. And so, with that, I do think it's very important that we discuss this issue. I believe that I can still be involved in the discussions of the issue, but at the point that any motion is made on anything that's involved in that's set forth in the agenda, I'll have to remove myself, including signing any letters, which at that point I'd probably ask the Vice Chairman to be the signatory on any letters. So I guess at that point, is somebody from the department going to be coming up and talking about this? There he is.
Chairman, while Elmer's coming up,
okay.
In all respect to everyone in the room, I'm starting to feel like an attorney, but I also have to make a disclosure, so if you'll indulge me for just a second. Chairman McBeath, NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest. The matter before this body may affect my pecuniary interest as it relates to my employer for employment by Resource Concepts Incorporated, or RCI. RCI currently has 2 clients who have significant interest in this project. One is involved in the state engineer's hearing, and the other one is publicly opposed to the project and intends to state as much in their comments to the draft environmental impact statement that is subject to this agenda item. RCI is helping both clients prepare material in support of their respective cases, and I have been involved in both projects. Therefore, I conclude that the independent judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would be materially affected by this relationship. And because this is a clear case of disqualifying conflict of interest, I'm going to be abstaining from voting in this matter.
Okay. Questions? I'm the attorney. I think we got to the same spot. Okay, Elmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Elmer Bull, Habitat Division Chief for the Department of Wildlife. Again, the agenda item description travels over quite a bit of country. I'll start with the draft EIS and talk just briefly about where we're at with that. The comments for that, the original comment period was right at the end of September sometime. That was extended out to October 11th. And our people down in that part of the country are working very hard and furiously to put the comments to that. We've got representation from all of the divisions, basically, with the exception of law enforcement and a couple others. But working very hard on that, and fully intend to have those comments wrapped up and sent to the BLM by that date. So that's pretty much the status there. As far as the status of our protest relative to those water rights, we filed a total of 11 protests. There was a total of 25 applications, 19 in Spring Valley and 6 in Delamar Cave and Dry Lake Valley. We filed protests against all 6 of the Dry Lake Delamar Cave applications, and we did 5 in Spring Valley. Part of that was a cost issue. It cost a lot of money to file protests, so we only did 5, and we selected areas close to some of our interests to focus on those. As far as those protests are still intact and valid. We have not done anything with those. But in the interest of full disclosure, we have had conversations with representatives from the Southern Nevada Water Authority concerning the possibility of entering into a stipulated agreement, similar to what the DOI agencies did back in 2006. And essentially, we have not moved forward with that, but we have had discussions, and the last week of the leadership team meeting, our group decided that was probably a pretty good strategy to move forward and investigate the possibility of doing that. Just to give you a little bit of background, there's a lot of history on this, and I'm not sure how many people understand what has gone on relative to these water rights applications, but they've been through this process once before. The state engineer ruled on both of those application packages, granting a significant amount of water, in one case 60,000 acre-feet out of Spring Valley, and the other 3 valleys a combined total of around 18,500 acre-feet. However, the protestants that were involved in the process back then filed an appeal to the federal court. The federal court didn't see anything wrong with the state engineer's ruling. It was again appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did vacate one of the rulings. It was the Cave Valley one. It wasn't the court action from the Supreme Court wasn't related to any dispute over the state engineer's opinion about water rights and available water rights and what might be available to transport. It had to do with the technicality stretching way back, and basically the technicality was that the state engineer didn't act in a timely manner on those applications. So basically, that decision was vacated, or that ruling was vacated. The other one, even though it wasn't, and I don't understand and I don't know the history there why it wasn't vacated also, but basically the state engineer elected to come back and advertise all those applications again and accept comments and protests. So, and that's where it's at right now. And the hearings on those protests are due to start on Monday. So, the stipulated agreement that we have discussed briefly with SNWA people would be modeled after the stipulated agreements that 4 Department of Interior agencies entered into with SNWA way back in 2006. And essentially, what happens did happen in that instance is that in exchange for those agencies dropping the protest against those water applications, there was this agreement drawn up, and it was the intent of those 4 agencies to put together and require hydrologic and biologic monitoring and mitigation plans. Essentially, I guess they were acknowledging that the program was probably going to move forward, and their protests were not going to be honored, and the project was not going to be stopped dead in its tracks. So they were looking for a means to make sure they tried to protect the interest of wildlife, both water and wildlife itself and the habitat that it's reliant on. So that was the impetus for seeking out those agreements. The stipulated agreements are very, very lengthy, very, very detailed. But you know, for example, in the hydrologic plan, it calls for extensive monitoring, including but not limited to monitoring wells, spring flow measurements, water chemistry analyses, quality control procedures, and reporting requirements. Goes into management requirements, including use of a technical review panel to evaluate various aspects of what's going on with the water program, and mitigation requirements also to identify means of mitigating in the event that there's negative impacts start to become evident from the groundwater pumping. So we're kind of looking at it the same way. It kind of comes down to a probability issue. If we thought we don't want water leaving eastern Nevada and going south, in a perfect world we wouldn't have to deal with this. But the fact of the matter is, there's been applications made on that water. The state engineer has a limited number of criteria that he can use to actually reject those. In the first round of this process, he did not find that any of those 4 criteria applied, and was basically statutorily obligated to issue those. But of course, the level of extraction of water from the ground was based on an extensive amount of water modeling that went on, and basically the hydrologist from the state engineer's office came up with some numbers that he felt were legitimate as far as water that could be extracted from those basins without causing extreme damage. So that's how those numbers came about. But like I said, that was all overturned by the Supreme Court. The process restarted, and that's where we're at now. As soon as it restarted, we filed our protest against it, and that's where, and so did many others. If you look on the website, there's oodles of protesters to this thing, and it's understandable. The hearings on this start on Monday. So it's a massive subject, and I don't know what else. I'd be happy to try to answer questions. I don't know if I have all the answers to this thing. It's a massive.
Okay, we got some dueling DAG stuff going on here right now, and with regard to myself and Commissioner Drew, what we're trying to determine is whether we as commissioners, even though we've disclosed and are indicating that we're going to abstain from the vote, is whether we can discuss this issue, as commissioners. And the alternative would be that if we can't, or if we can't get an agreement, that maybe, or find some authority that allows us to do that, is that we then be asked to be excused from the commission, and we can put our comments in via public comment. And I probably would intend to do that. So unless we get a definitive answer, I'm probably just going to go that route, so there's no question.
Yeah, then that's fine, as long as we don't have to go outside.
Yeah, especially when it was yesterday, it would be great. Okay, so I guess, Howard, you're done, okay. Then, do any of the commissioners have any comments or any questions of Delamar with regard to that subject matter? Commissioner Conlon.
Could I ask Elmer some questions?
Sure.
No. Elmer, these hearings start again Monday, right?
Correct.
And NDOW is going to be represented there?
Yes,
You'll be there.
the wind is going to be there.
I'll be there.
Oh, you'll be there. Okay. And,
I'll make sure.
our protests are still there.
Yep, they're still there.
And would it help if there was a letter from the board? Also?
Letter backing up our protest?
Right.
Yeah.
Turn it over.
I,
Turn it over if you're safe. Just say you're turning it over. What you gonna do?
I'm turning my mic over to the vice chairman.
Just for a moment.
And I'll ask the vice chairman if I may be excused.
You may be excused. Any discussion? You have questions, sir?
I just had a brief question. What? You done?
well, I just thought we should, if there's a motion to be made, I'd like to move that we join.
You have to have a public
NDOW.
comment.
Yeah, let's have some discussion and then go out to public comment and
Yeah.
then bring it back to the commission.
I'd just like to know what your thoughts are on the content. What would be the most appropriate content for a letter from the commission? Support.
It would, most likely mirror the language that's in our formal protest. I don't have it with me, but there's got them over there. That was language generated by our department engineer describing.
And the commission has previously weighed in on this issue, and I'm trying to think if there's better, should we reiterate some of that, or what are your views on that?
This commission has already weighed in on this particular.
Well, on parts, we've talked about it a lot. I'm trying to think what we've had in the way of a formal action. We haven't had any formal action in this particular one, but has the department, any of this presented anything that the commission has stood for before? None of that is part of this, right?
As far as I know, this subject hasn't been
This
discussed.
particular, I mean, we've talked
Yeah.
about water. We'll make sure there wasn't anything out there that was old that was being
Sure.
pulled. All right, so you think the best aspect is to have a letter that basically states we support
what? The department's protest. No, how do you feel about that?
I definitely don't think there will be any harm, but as far as value or usefulness, there are a lot of protests other than NDOW, and we have presented our protests. So I know the state engineer's office is inundated with a lot of documents. So like I said, I don't think that it will be harmful, but as far as an actual value, I don't think it's necessary.
Commissioner McBeath.
I'd like to follow up with that, with this new, do the other boards, like the agriculture board, did they file a protest or send a letter?
I cannot recall off the top of my head, so I don't know.
Given they have to pay money to file a protest, I suspect not. They're not their budget is the Department of Agriculture, so if there was a protest filed, it would be the Department of Agriculture, like we are doing for wildlife and state of
Elmer, do you know if Department of Ag files protests?
I was in that website yesterday, and the list was really long. I didn't pay particular attention to.
I can see if I can find it. I know that the list of service for these hearings are 2 to 3 pages of private members and then other entities, but I don't recall some Department of Ag.
All right. Elmer, you're right. It's incredibly complex. It's a shame that Commissioner Mike McBeath is out there because I think he can shed some light on some stuff. But I guess that I need to get caught up a little bit better here. Now, we've got our protest filed, which originally NDOW wasn't going to have an opportunity to do at one point, a long time ago, because we hadn't acted 20 years ago.
Yeah, we did not file on the original applications, which happened in 1989. Not sure of the reason for that, but I was told by a couple of people that in that period of time, the director of the DCNR said that the Division of Water Resources would represent the Department of Wildlife's interests, and consequently, I'm not sure if that's completely true, but I know we did not file protest until this second round.
And with the department going to a division to a department, that probably didn't help a couple times. So the opportunity knocked, and we were able to get in as protestants. Okay. Now we're heading into stipulated agreement type stuff here, and the department has decided, from a department standpoint, to submit to those stipulated agreements. Is that?
We need to have some additional discussions with Southern Nevada Water Authority. We had some discussion quite some time ago where I tried this past week to kind of reinitiate that after our leadership team made the decision that that's what we would like to pursue.
So we haven't gone to that point yet, but the point is that you're starting the process of seeing what kind of progress can be made in that arena, and that's because going down the protest path, those four things, if the state engineer has trouble backing up claims based on those four components that they've already gone against, then we lose out. We're going to be subject to whatever happens with the ultimate thing here. And this is where we struggle, and the conservation community really generally wants to just say no. This is where it's very difficult because you're selling your soul to the devil in a lot of opinions. So it's difficult for me. I have to be honest with you. For me, they got more money than the state does. Southern Nevada does. There's no doubt about that. They're going to have public. So I certainly support the concept, and that's where I guess I'm heading here. Is that I not so much support the protest, but to get a feel for where we're at in this stipulated agreement process. So if we're going to partake in some kind of stipulation, when does that have to occur by?
Well, they came and sat down with us and said, look, we'd like you to withdraw your protest. Okay? In return for that, we would enter into a stipulated agreement with you to get your wildlife needs into an agreement between the two of us, much like they did with the federal government. Okay, they have federal agencies, they have entered into a stipulated agreement about monitoring a whole variety of things. We're interested in taking care of the wildlife of the state of Nevada. And so the question is, do we roll the dice, do we put all of our money and chips in the middle of the thing and hope that the protest prevails? And quite frankly, everybody I've talked to, chances of that happening are very low. I'd rather get something for wildlife of the state of Nevada in an agreement. I think the hearings are going to go on for some period of time. It kind of depends on how motivated they are at this point. It was a couple, 3 months ago that we talked with them. So we need to talk to them again. The other thing is I need to talk with the state water engineer, because if he rules, there will be a monitoring aspect to whatever he does, and whether or not I can get our ore in the water there as well. And that may even be a better ore, quite frankly. Because we want to make sure that whatever they're doing, the pumping's not going to dry up the riparians, the springs, and have an effect on our wildlife, our hatcheries, on and on. So that's what we're leaning towards doing. And we told them that we would seriously consider it, and we've given them the final answer. But when they walked away from there, they felt pretty good that we were strongly considering that, and we would be getting into contact with them.
Yeah, just to expand on that last point that Ken made, when the state engineer issued his rulings in 2007 and 2008 relative to these application packages, the very first item as a stipulation underneath the agreement to grant that water was that a monitoring and mitigation plan consisting of both biological and hydrological parameters shall be approved by the state engineer. So we just kind of stumbled into this in the last couple of days after reading this ruling and thinking that, well, maybe we would have the opportunity to petition the state engineer to become involved in that process, because I suspect what's going to happen is that Southern Nevada Water Authority is required to present these here. It's going to be, so what they're going to present is what they worked out with the DOI agencies, more than likely. They're going to come and present that to the state engineer. Here, they're going to say, here's this monitoring and mitigation plan, and then, you know, perhaps that would be a better point for us to enter into this process. But we just started talking about that in the last couple of days. So, being that we're a state agency, I mean, if the state engineer gets a monitoring and mitigation plan without trained biologists on staff, I don't know how they're going to determine that what's being presented to them is adequate. So maybe that's going to present an opportunity for us to get involved at that point, and maybe not go with the other stipulated agreement. We just need to look at those. It would seem to make sense if we could do that.
So I don't mean to monopolize here, but the timing is tough for us because, of course, we're looking at December before we're going to have another shot at it. But at the same time, it might be a little premature for us to take too strong of a position either way because we need to let some things settle out, find out which one of these two ways might be working. Are we facing a deadline? Are we going to get hit with a deadline that we're not going to be able to respond to as a commission?
I don't know of a deadline. We need to look into that, I'm sure, and find out whether we're limited here. But I think that a discussion with the state engineer's office really quick is going to be very wise to see whether that option would work.
If Jason says, that's a great idea, we'd really like to work with you, which is a sister state agency, that's going to be great. We'll just jump right on that. He might say, well, it's inappropriate. I don't know. But the timing is going to be all the negotiation. I mean, Southern Nevada Water Authority is going to assess whether it's in their best interest to actually enter into an agreement with us, because they'd rather see things move along if they can take care of our needs, and then they can say, well, wildlife's taken care of, you know, and then they got to deal with all these other folks that are lined up to slay the dragon. So, but I think it's an untenable situation for us to say all or nothing. I don't want to put all our wildlife chips in the middle of the table and say, we think we're going to win when I don't think we're going to win.
And that ultimately might be where we have to discuss as a commission if we're going to support that, at least that concept, you know. We may not be able to get too detailed about what we're supporting or not supporting, but it might be conceptually, you know, we prefer to see this. And without the details of being able to discuss it, we're going to be largely left dealing with what the hand that's dealt to us outside of the outside negotiations.
Well, one idea, you know, one of the things I've learned since I've been here almost 5 years now, that wildlife was not looked after historically in this state when it came to water. And you just have to look at the Humboldt Sink. Okay, that water is being gobbled up and utilized in every way they can think of so that it doesn't go to the sink. And until they have a hiccup somewhere, that we finally get some water trickling down. I mean, in today's world, I can't imagine that some water for wildlife wouldn't have been provided. So I think the simple fact is that a statement from the commission that water for wildlife is essential. We have a responsibility, a societal responsibility to provide water at some level, and that would support the Department of Wildlife's request for consideration. I think a statement like that would be useful.
We're largely looking at, from the Department of Wildlife and Water standpoint, we'd certainly, two primary concerns. It's got to be springs, and it's got to be surface waters.
Hatcheries.
Or hatcheries. But those seem to be the top. And I mean, you can talk about the geology and the hydrology and hydrogeology and all that other stuff until you turn blue. We'd probably never really fully be prepared to talk about it. But I'm trying to wrap my arms around it in a simple way, and it's not going to happen.
And you have till December 2nd
Yeah.
to submit written comments.
Until, I think our meeting's on the 2nd, right?
My comments are, I do not like the all or nothing approach. I've dealt with water in the state of Nevada started in '97. I bought thousands of acre feet. I'm surprised I'm not sitting out there with the commissioners right now, but luckily I haven't been involved in any parties associated with this one. The all or nothing approach, I don't think is going to work for us at all. With them coming to us, puts us in a better spot than us coming to them. And from a negotiation standpoint, that's the best place to be. You do not want to be approaching them with your idea. They've come to you. Now you've got a better leg on a negotiation standpoint. So I think that we use that to our fullest and get as much as we can.
Yeah, the stipulated agreement tonight, I don't know if everybody on the commission got a copy of the stipulated agreement. I know I took one up to Suzanne and I thought it was going to go out. It's one of the older, 108. Yeah. And we would be looking at something similar than that, but there's other waters that we're interested in that aren't covered in that stipulated agreement. There's other sources, other wildlife species for that matter. That focuses pretty much on federally owned lands, protection of federally owned lands and water resources, and sensitive species. So those are the things that we would want to have monitored also.
Okay, any further commission discussion? Take it out to the county advisory board unless Elmer has anything else.
Thank you, Commissioner Rock. Bob Cook with the Douglas County Advisory Board. The Douglas County Board was in support of Nevada Department of Wildlife's protest to Southern Nevada Water Authority's opinion applications. They felt that any water being removed would be detrimental to the wildlife in every way you can think of, whether it's groundwater, surface water, springs, seeps. And we're talking eastern Nevada, and they're pursuing it in Utah also, as we all know. My personal opinion is I'm opposed to the Southern Nevada Water Authority because I feel if Las Vegas doesn't have the water, they shouldn't be able to build it. I also don't want Nevada to turn into another Owens Valley.
Did they discuss mitigating factors at your meeting at all?
No, we did not. So that just came up. You mean like all or nothing, like what you guys are talking about? No, we didn't. It just came up here with you now, so we didn't have the opportunity to discuss it as a board. So that's really all I can comment on. Other than my personal opinion is, yeah, I think that you guys are heading in the right direction. Maybe all or nothing is not the best thing. Maybe you should look at all your options. Instead of just saying it's either all or nothing. You might have some good negotiating tools as you move forward.
And all your board members were there?
Actually, we had 4 board members, and one of them had to recuse himself.
Okay.
As you know,
yeah,
we're talking about. So there was only really 3 that made that decision.
Okay. I just wanted to see if anybody else weighed in.
We wanted him to weigh in, but didn't get it. So, thank you very much.
A former state engineer sits on there.
That's exactly. Yeah. And he is, well, for obvious reasons, and recuse himself because I think he's involved. So, thank you.
Thank you. Come on up. Dane Bradfield, Lincoln County Advisory Board. Our board is in support of the commission directing NDOW and also the commission itself writing a letter. And then for the record, this is my personal thoughts. Lincoln County has entered into a stipulation agreement. Personally, I feel like we've rolled over, let them scratch our billies, and then we piss out these stipulations that they probably won't listen to. Maybe that is the best
decision here, I don't know. Many of you are much more educated than I am. But that's a personal opinion, obviously very emotional. They're going to suck our water out. That doesn't come back. I apologize. Nevada's the most arid state in the continental U.S. already, and they start sucking water out of places like that to take it somewhere else, where they just get bigger and bigger, like the populated areas of Clark County, and use it to build water fountains and stuff like that. In the meantime, we're losing sage grouse, deer, elk, bobcat, coyote, everything else that relies on water to get a drink. And I think it's just harmful all the way around. And I would support the department, or the commission directing the department to stay with protesting applications, and also the commission to be in support of it. And also you can do it through the state water engineer and also the BLM for the pipeline. And I believe the public comment on that closes on October 11th. And I've written personal comments, and hope that the commission and the department will also consider that too.
So, before you leave, I'm going to keep score here. You're for keeping the protest pretty much an all or nothing.
Well,
or sending a letter saying, that's what I'm trying to get to a score. I'm looking at everybody here, and I'm getting all kinds of different head shakes.
Yeah, and I understand that. And from the things that I've listened to here discussed, maybe this is going to get shoved down our throats, and there's no way we can stop it, so we ought to put some stipulations in there no matter what. And again, for the record, this is personal. Obviously, for a county, I can't discuss this. Right now, I don't know what the best solution is. Emotionally, I would hope we could stop it, and that's what I'd want ultimately. You guys are the ones that are going to point at this to make the big decisions, and whatever input I can give to help you on that. So, I'd like to see it stop.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wellington.
Thank you. For the record, Ken Wellington, Elko County. I want to thank Elmer and Steve. They spent some time on the phone with me before my meeting because we discussed the background and the direction that it was going. And I have to be realistic looking at this because I know the power of Southern Nevada Water Authority. I personally know Pat Mulroy from when I was in Vegas. I know what their intent is. I know what they're coming after. And so I have to, and I talked to my board about this, we discussed both of it, both the standing with our opposition of it initially or looking at a stipulation. I had county commissioner present at the meeting with me, Elko County Commissioner, had Cattlemen's Association and Nevada Outfitters and Guides and Houndsmen were also there on top of the public that was at my meeting. What I'm going to tell you is that there were several things thrown out. Nobody really wanted to look at a stipulation, but again, being realistic, we see that as probably the best option at this point. We had some major concerns. We wanted to see like a 2-year pre-pumping data prior to it. We were concerned about the guidelines and the triggers that would stop the flow if something was to happen, if one of the areas were set depleted. It came up that BLM and NDOW are ultimately responsible to protect the resources. If those resources are not damaged or depleted for our wildlife and the habitat, we were insistent that the public and the consensus throughout our meeting was consistent that there should be monitoring guidelines written in stone and enforcement laid out if a stipulation was to take place. The county commissioner said that the commission had already spoke about this in Elko County, and there were major concerns that the water would pull off the aquifer for the Ruby Valley side of that and the Antelope Valley up above. And so with that, being realistic, as much as we'd like to see it stand, I think I'm going to have to put my trust, after talking with Elmer and some of the staff about this, into their hands as to what they feel is going to benefit wildlife and our habitat enhancement. Thank you.
Paul Harris, Clark County Cab. I'm not for it, guys, okay? So, the Clark County Cab unanimously supports NDOW and the commission in their efforts to come up with a workable solution with Southern Nevada Water Authority. We are concerned for pulling water from northern Nevada and the effects that's going to have on wildlife. I mean, you take water out, it's pumping water out of the ground, it's going to hurt springs, it's going to hurt wildlife. So we are concerned about that. We support the commission and NDOW in their efforts to come up with some alternatives that are acceptable to generate.
Gilliana Crescent Advisory Board, we too voted unanimously to support the department and its submittal, but at the same time, the reality of when you've got over 90% of the state's population in Clark County and their need for water, and I think the idea of trying to work out some stipulation so that we walk away, piece of the pie is better than no pie at all. Because I just think the numbers, when you got so much depending and riding on what happens in Clark County for the overall economy of the state, a lot of these esoteric issues that we talk about, wildlife and what it's going to do to the aquifer and some of these other valleys and communities that may suffer if and when the aquifer gets drawn down below a point at which it can supply the needs of the wildlife and the habitat in those areas. You only got so much water. You can only go so far. And when they start thinking about humans versus wildlife and habitat, you know who wins that race. And so I think that, Director Mayer's comments regarding maybe we should take a step back and not go for the throat, but try to see that we can work out something that's amicable and everybody walks away a winner. As long as we can do something for wildlife, that's what our focus is from this group. But there are other groups that are working just as equally hard to focus on development and providing the needs of mankind in other areas. Thank you.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Advisory Board. We voted unanimously to support, to recommend the Commissioner's support NDOW's involvement in the mitigation of any and all negative effects on wildlife and opposition to the project proposed.
Cincinnati, Lyon County, we voted along the same lines to support NDOW. We don't want to see any water transfers, but we know what we're up against. So, thank you.
Tom?
All been said.
We'll go out to public comment. No other county vice boards have comment. Any public comment? Mel?
Mel Bellamy, Washoe County. Can you just clarify for me what it was the CAB voted on? Was it to continue the protest letter, or was it something else? It was support the protest. I got to say that I'm all for nothing. I think that's where we ought to be. If we're going to go negotiate with someone, I don't think we should negotiate with a half a sack of water. Let's see what they want to give us, but I think I got to say it. Hey, what about the other guys? What about the little guys? What about the guys in the county? We're not the only one in the game with wildlife. But these guys are too, and I don't know. It's pretty sad when a big metropolitan like that can just ram shot over the rest of the country. And I think we ought to stand our ground here and go all for nothing. Thank you.
I've got a card here from Mike McBeath. Just so you know, sir, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Let's first talk about the water resources relevant to this. Mike McBeath, but speaking of that myself, the issues. I'm not as familiar with Spring Valley. Obviously, we have a number of creeks along the Shell Creek Range, and we also have creeks and springs, creeks and springs on both the Shell Creek Range and the Snake Range on each side of the Spring Valley. So I do know that, and I believe there might be some valley springs and valley water resources down in the bottom as well. And with regard to Cave, Dry Lake, and Delamar, it's a little bit more complex. Not only do you have creeks, and a lot less of them because it's a drier country, but you have mountain block springs. Those are the springs that are at the base of the mountain, so to speak, and then springs in the valleys. But more important is that the aquifer that's at issue here really also encompasses other valleys. And most important is that the White River Valley, which is adjacent, is basically west of Cave, Dry Lake, and Delamar, is really part of the underground aquifer that's at issue here that eventually comes out, goes through Moapa, and really out the Overton Arm, Lake Mead. Okay, and so once you realize that, and going through 2.5 years of hearings and dealing with all of the litigation in the Cave, Dry Lake, and Delamar, one thing you need to understand is that the water that is in Cave Valley discharges at a series of springs, Flag Spring Complex, the Emigrant Spring Complex, and most importantly the Sunnyside Complex, also including Hot Spring. And with regard to Sunnyside and Hot Spring, those are on the Perch Wildlife Management Area that's in White River Valley. In addition, White River Valley goes down and goes into the Brannigan Valley, and at that point we have the Keith Pittman Wildlife Management Area. There's a series of springs in the Brannigan Valley, including the water rights that the Keith Pittman facility has. And then continuing on out to Lake Mead, the Overton Wildlife Management Area is affected. Now there's a lot less issues there because I don't think we have a lot of water rights. 15 seconds? Oh boy. I would strongly suggest a letter on the DEIS, and I would also, I don't know if our agenda item goes far enough to allow a letter on the protest, but I would concentrate on the agreement, the stipulated agreement. I think you do need it. I wouldn't go all or nothing.
Thank you. You went 15 seconds over. If anybody's keeping track. Any other public comment? I'll bring it back to the commission.
Vice Chair Rob, can I just, I guess, expand on my previous comment? I've been looking at the notice that was sent out, and according to this notice, it looks like it would be helpful, and it would definitely be of value if the commission were to desire to submit some kind of letter. And the letter actually would go straight to the hearing officer, Susan Joseph Taylor. So it looks like the state engineer's office is inviting anyone to submit comments, whether they be orally at the hearing. And if you want to do that, that's Friday, October 7th. You can go attend the hearing and make public comments, or you can submit them in writing. And the deadline for that would be 5 p.m. Friday, December 2nd.
Okay. Everybody heard that? Is there a flavor of board? Any further discussion? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I will take a shot at it. I was going to say a motion, so we can have some discussion. I would move that the commission take a general stance to support the department's efforts with regards to comprising and agreeing to a stipulated agreement with regards to the potentially withdrawing their protest to the specific protest that's justified in our agenda. In Spring Valley, Cave Valley, Dry Lake Valley, and Delamar Valley.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second discussion, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Commissioner Rain?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. You know, what I worry about in any stipulated agreement, and I think that's supported by a lot of what we've heard public, is that there is nothing, no stipulated agreement in the world that could ever bring back 1,000th of the value of what will happen to this area. Basically, any stipulated agreement would be a nothing in comparison. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years, but we would need glaciers back on the ground or to bring this water back down. It's not something that, they're taking away something that will destroy parts of wildlife habitat for hundreds, if not thousands of generations to come. What kind of stipulated agreement, what kind of money, what kind of whatever would be a pimple on that? So, you know, the stipulated agreement part, it just doesn't make sense. If this was, I mean, I've referred to, well, it's another Owens Valley. That's not in Owens Valley. Owens Valley, there's water coming off the mountain. This is gone forever. At least Owens Valley, if they happen to cut that pipeline at some point, it might have a chance of coming back. This is not. For many hundreds of generations to come, there is no going back, and the untold consequences of this sucking out of this basin. And other counties around it, Erie County, Lander County, other counties, it'll affect them eventually too. If this happens, that's right next door. Once that water gets sucked out of there, they've already got the billions of dollars of pipeline. What's another 50? What's another 100 miles? It's central Nevada now. I mean, right now it's only Lincoln County. Okay, we don't care about Lincoln County because they're only a small portion of our state. Well, heck, the edge of White Pine, now it's into Eureka, now it's into Lander. It's everybody. It's that whole section of the state, and it's forever as far as us and our however many generations that could be as concerned, and it could be devastating. Likely devastating. So, and there's very possibly other effects. It's interesting talking to some of the petroleum engineers. I have to run into a bunch of people that work down in the Railroad Valley area of possible side effects that don't even appear in some of these agreements on possible petroleum, what could happen when the pressure is released off petroleum. It's fascinating to hear, you know, speculation. Like, man, you want me to prove that? You want me to prove that, you know, that some of that water that's holding the petroleum in some of these areas? Could be. There's a lot of theories out there that aren't even in these agreements. You might contaminate the whole aquifer, what's left of it, just by reducing the pressures. That's what people are saying. It's a possibility. They're out there. We don't even know what we're doing out there. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't stipulate. No stipulation would be a bill. Thank you.
You already have a motion and a second.
A motion and a second.
And it's appropriate to go ahead and make an amendment to the motion.
Mostly, Commissioner, I think I made the motion so we could have a discussion was really the primary thing.
And I'm feeling the same way. I think that Commissioner Rain was a lot more eloquent than I am, but I just can't see
that this is gonna happen anytime soon if there's enough people protesting. And, I know Southern Nevada needs the water. I live in Southern Nevada. I've been there 60-something years. And, they need the water. But I sure as heck don't want to take it away from where I like to go fishing and hunting. And I don't think it's fair to the people that live up there. We got water in Lake Mead, lots of it.
Yes?
I guess, Elmer, the department, somebody, what's the status of the pipeline? Is it in? Is there
Of the pipeline itself?
Yeah.
No, the draft DEIS is just out now on the pipeline. So that's where that's at. It hasn't made it through the legal process yet.
I share your concerns. What's concerning for me is if we think for a minute that we're going to stop this, I think we're being ignorant. We're not going to stop. So the question really does become, do we put our resources into stopping it, trying to stop it, and to what end? I mean, what are the alternatives? Just saying no. And I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to go right now. I guess I'm trying to think through this a little bit. If we say that we're going to take a position to where we're just going to, we're going to hold firm on our convictions up here that we want to say no, basically we're conceding that whatever happens to us is going to happen to us, and that's the end of it. If we lose, that's the final straw. That's the last shot we get at it. You don't get a second shot. You don't get a second bite at the apple in this process. They look at you and we say, well, okay, so we lost that battle. We lost our protest. Now we'd like to talk to you about stipulating what we really need. And they're going to say, you lost your protest. We don't talk to you anymore. You're done. We're moving on over here to take care of our stipulated agreements. And that's how this process works, if I'm understanding it properly. And we're out, and we can get what everybody else has put in place for us.
One thing,
that's what I struggle with.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Rain, I share your anxiety also. It's really, really scary. But one thing that helped me a little bit was to read through the stipulated agreement and also to read through the engineer's ruling when he approved the water rights for extraction out of those valleys. There was a tremendous amount of calculation and science and so forth that went into it. However, at the end of the day and at the end of that writing, the state engineer still stated that, we won't know for sure what's going to happen until the pumping starts. But there's a definite requirement for a lot of pre-pumping data gathering so that we have good baseline data prior to the pumping starting, and then there's a tremendous amount of monitoring that's going to go on afterwards. And I definitely wouldn't compare this to an Owens Valley situation, but it makes me nervous also. But there's a heck of a lot of science that's being applied through these stipulated strategies and so forth. So it still is nerve-wracking because it is unknown and nobody can tell for sure what's going to happen there. But looking at the power of the Las Vegas area, I think we just don't feel it would be stopped.
Any other commission discussion? Bring it to a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I think a consideration for the other commissioners, because I know there's a concern. I don't see a need for some kind of split vote here. I did that primarily for discussion purposes. So I'm trying to, I guess when we're prepared to take a vote, I'd be prepared to remove my motion. So I think what I'd like to do is try to continue our discussion and see if there's alternatives, see if there's an alternative way to go here. So we've got a stipulated agreement that's not potential that's sitting out there. The only other option that I can see right now is to, well, there's two other options, is to not take action, period. Take action to make it formal to say we're not gonna take a position, or we could take a position to continue with the protest. And I have to be honest, as much as you guys are probably not in favor of doing the stipulated agreement, I guess I'm kind of in the same boat with regards to supporting the protest just outright. So.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Now, is it my understanding that we have until December 2nd at 5 o'clock to get a comment in?
For written comments, for letters.
That would be applying to us. So we could actually do something the morning of our meeting on December 2nd. By then, we would have time to see some of the fallout from between now and then.
Then take action early
Have it
that
as the
day,
very
which would
first
provide an
agenda.
opportunity for some kind of draft statement to be submitted based on the motion or actions taken by us. Questions?
Basically have 2 draft letters ready to go, so when we make a decision, that one's going.
Or just based on our deliberations and any position we might take that first day. It would have to happen that same day, but I understand.
I'd like to ask staff, is that logistically possible to get a letter in that was done the same day into them? I mean, do they accept email copies? Do they accept that?
No, the notice specifically says that emails do not constitute written, but I mean, it's in Carson. I'm sure if we have a draft and there aren't major changes or disagreements, we can have someone drive down to Carson and file it.
Before we accepted any motion like that, I'd like to ask if there would be some form of a commitment from the department to go ahead and be able to do that, because otherwise we're wasting our breath.
I believe there's a state engineer's office in Las Vegas, and I believe if you have it at the state engineer's office, whether it's at Las Vegas or Carson City, it's at the state engineer's office.
The meeting's here.
Yeah, so, yeah, the meeting's here. I was thinking it was in Vegas, sorry about that.
But we could email it to there and have them, if the staff there could do it as well. Would there be a commitment from the department that they'd be able to do that?
If you generated a letter that morning, we did in Carson City.
Right. Okay. My position, I think, is, if this water deal was infinitely good for Las Vegas, but there's no sustainable yield. We talked about that in other animals. There's no sustainable yield. Ultimately, it will cause a worsening crisis in Las Vegas when this runs out at some point. It's not forever. I mean, that's one of these things that drives me nuts about the whole subject is they're just putting it off till they're retired, and it's the next guy's problem, and it's going to be worse. This allows the growth, gives you the water, and then tomorrow, wow. I mean, it's a lose. I'm trying to find the winner in it other than a few people for a few years. So
Mr. Chairman, or Vice Chairman, with that in mind, I would remove my original motion. The second is going to do the same. And propose a second motion, which would be to table this matter to our December 2nd and 3rd meeting here in Reno. And we request the chairman that this item be placed as number 1 on the December 2nd agenda, Friday, December 2nd, first item, so that we can deliberate and possibly draft a position statement or draft a letter pertinent to protest or stipulated agreements that can be then forwarded to the state engineer's office.
second half purpose discussion, we could add in there that we draft the letters first before that meeting. If we could make sure that's part of the, we possibly add that to the motion. We draft the letters before the meeting so that they can have public input, so the commissioners can all look at it.
I'm fine.
Okay, so that would be part of the main motion. How are we on that?
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And I believe this is the best way to go. Now the county advisory boards have heard all of our comments, have a more informed, they had a lot of questions at the Washington County Advisory Board meeting on what it was we're looking for. Now they've seen the discussion, they can go back and present what we've talked about here today at their advisory boards and ask for further comment coming back to us to give us direction on where we go on the site. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?